How do you start with Mohamed El-Erian? Well, let's just discuss the news flow. We've got a number later in the program. I was just scratching at Jamie Cohen's desk, doing the math. Here's the number, Mohamed, and it puts in scale the Irish debacle. Let's just bring up a good old number here. We're going to call it the number. 24 billion euros, 34 billion US. Who's counting? If it's their GDP or our GDP, that's $2.1 trillion. We lose scope, the scale of this crisis for Ireland.
Absolutely, Tom. I mean, you called it a debacle, and it is a debacle. Another number I like to use, which puts it in the Irish context, is initially it cost them 35% of GDP. It could cost them even more than 50% of GDP. That is an enormous number that is having to be plugged in to a banking system.
Are the elites doing their fair share? By elites, I mean, are the commercial banks of Europe that own this stuff, are they taking the appropriate haircut?
The only people doing their fair share right now, in fact, I would say they're doing more than their fair share, are the taxpayers of Ireland, who are having to go through tremendous austerity, and the IMF and the EU that are putting in money. The creditors, most of the creditors so far, have not gone through any burden sharing.
Why? I mean, it's absolutely remarkable.
It is remarkable. It is inadvisable, but it is a political decision that has been taken. It surprises me. I don't think you can sustain that political decision.
But you know all these guys. You're jetting around the world. I want to talk about Tokyo in a minute. You're going around the world. You're talking to these elites. What are they hoping for? When I do my literature, this is really important, folks. When I do my literature, every time I see the word hope, I put a circle around it. It's a dangerous word. What are those elites of Europe hoping for?
What they're hoping for is by maintaining the creditors intact, that the creditors are going to rush back in with new money. What they haven't read is the history of debt crises, and the history of debt crises is very simple. Whenever you have a debt overhang, whenever you have this big cloud of debt, no new creditor will come in a big way.
Christopher Freeland writing you up lovely for Reuters, your trip to Tokyo. What a wonderful note as you talk to her about what you observed in your trip. What does the public need to know about Japan that you observed that we're not getting from the media, from me and others?
Two things surprised me. One is the extent of uncertainty that remains, the extent to which this invisible threat of radiation is causing a tremendous amount of uncertainty. On the other side, I was so impressed, Tom, by the courage and the steadfastness of all the Japanese I met. They are so focused on let's go through the rescue operations, let's do reconstruction, and let's help those in Japan that have been less lucky than we have.
Michael Darda wants to invest in Japan with MKM Partners. Does Mohamed El-Erian want to invest in Japan now?
We will be part of the reconstruction process. I think that we will see many private-public partnerships, and PIMCO will be there in terms of looking at suitable opportunities. I think more generally, there's going to be tremendous opportunity. This is a country that's going to spend anything between 2 to 4% of GDP in its reconstruction phase. So there will be lots of opportunities as we go forward.
Let's try to end positive on this section, the debacle, as you say, of Ireland and then Japan. Here's a Brazil, yeah, I can get it out. 3, 2, 1. The Brazilian miracle. You can see it over here, Mohamed.
Right.
The camera team is like a flanking mission between you and me and the screen. The Brazilian miracle. There it is, the currency. I got this so wrong. What were you thinking in 03, 04 about Brazil? What did PIMCO do as Lula took over?
Well, as early as 02, in fact, arguably we're too early. In July 02, when the bonds were trading at 45 cents on the dollar, we saw opportunity. We've been going to Brazil. I had been going to Brazil every quarter, and we truly believe that if you get a few things right, this is an economy that is capable of what we call a breakout phase. And what you see in this chart, what you see in many other charts, is this is an economy that is truly going through this historic phase. You know, it used to be said, Brazil is the economy of tomorrow, always has been, always will be. Well, today, tomorrow is happening now.
Where's the economy of Brazil right now?
It's in a development breakout phase. It has isolated elements of overheating. That's why its central bank is raising interest rates. That's why the fiscal agency is looking to adjust. But they are truly finding their rhythm, and they are promoting growth at levels that was unthinkable before.
With us, our guest host, Mohamed El-Erian. We're really just going to have a discussion here. I mean, you and I, 4 or 5 years ago, I remember standing in the basement of the IMF pre-crisis. The world's been turned on its head as we took lousy debt, publicized it, made it a public debt, and now there's this massive now what? Whether it's the fiscal deficit in the United States or it's in Europe. What is your now what? What are we going to see this year and next year?
So I'm going to divide that between what should happen and what's likely to happen. What should happen is that after the sequential contamination of balance sheet, that the public balance sheet is not going to be able to hand off to a healthy private sector. And to some extent, we see this in the United States. We see multinationals have gotten their act together. They're now able to go forward. In Europe, you don't. The Ireland news today is, guess what? Not only can we not hand off to the private sector, but the private sector has more debt that it wants to hand off to the public sector. So
it's almost circuitous.
It is. So what we'd like to see is an orderly handoff from an over-indebted public sector that has had to step in, not out of choice, but out of necessity to avoid a depression, to a healthy private sector. What we are likely to see is the multi-speed world in which some countries are able to do it, but unfortunately too many countries are not able to.
But critically, some societies and some portions of society, Michael Spence alluding to income distribution there, this idea of the haves and the have-nots, you're considered an elite. Your colleague Bill Gross, an elite. Maybe I'm one too, who knows? But the answer is they're the haves and the have-nots. How do we draw the have-nots into the debate as we come out of crisis?
I mean, Bill and I don't consider ourselves elite. In fact, we'd like to be taxed more, right?
You would like higher taxes?
I think, no, and I said this even before the Middle East started. It is not in the interest of any society for income inequality to keep on going up. It's in everybody's interest to avoid the extremes.
How do you respond, as we made a joke to Craig Torres about Chairman Paul, how do you, the idea that you do have an elite and you pull up or you bring up those struggling?
That is the American dream, right? That is to enable other people to backfill and come up and replace. That's how a society goes from strength to strength. The worst thing to happen, and that's why you had revolutions in Egypt and elsewhere, is for the elite to believe itself to be so special that it isolates itself from the rest of society. You know what? Society doesn't accept that.
Arthur Levitt is official surveillance New York Giants expert. You are our Jets expert. Talk about elites and about sheer arrogance. What do you need to see from the Jets besides the fact that football can restructure itself and move forward?
To have the Jets and the Giants in the same sentence and then call the Jets arrogant and elite doesn't go together.
Doesn't go together.
Like the Mets, like Mohamed, we are at the margin of society, and certainly the Mets and the Jets are at the margin of New York sports society, and we will continue to penetrate the middle. I think the Jets did great last year. When Mark Chancellor was hired as quarterback, I said within 2 to 3 years he will take us to the Super Bowl. We came close.
I wanted to end light because these are serious conversations, aren't they?
They are.
Your wonderful, your essay with Christian about Japan. Here's read this. What can it be? This is a great book, and again, page 290. Here it is, right here. When Markets Collide, Mohamed El-Erian, it won about 14 awards. I can't remember. Thank you, Mohamed, for being with us.